Ladies and gentlemen, people of the covenant, children of the ancient flame, hear this mystery. There is a path that few walk. It is narrow, it is rugged, and it leads not to the arms of a lover, but to the secret place of the Most High. I speak not against love. I speak not against marriage, nor the sacred union, but I speak of a deeper truth, a lost truth, a truth forgotten in a world intoxicated by the need to be needed. There is a glory in solitude. Do you not know Abraham walked alone before he became the father of many nations? Moses fled into the desert alone before he stood before Pharaoh. Elijah heard the still small voice not in the whirlwind, but in the cave alone. Aloneness is not a curse, it is a calling. You see, the world tells you that you must find someone to complete you, but the kingdom of God says you are complete in him. You were not made to find another half, you were made to be wholly consecrated, set apart. When you are alone, no voice is louder than his, no comfort is sweeter than his spirit, no embrace more real than the presence of the living God. Relationships built in the flesh will always fail you. But solitude rooted in the spirit will never betray you. A lover may lie, a friend may leave, but the one who sees you in secret will reward you openly. Do you remember Yeshua the Messiah? Before the miracles, before the disciples, before the cross, he went into the wilderness. 40 days alone, and there, in the silence, he triumphed. The enemy is not afraid of crowded hearts. He is afraid of the heart that stands alone with God. Do not fear the quiet. Do not despise the empty room. That room becomes a sanctuary. That stillness becomes a trumpet. That solitude becomes strength. For when you walk alone with God, you walk with more than the world can ever offer. So I say to you, if you are alone, you are not forsaken. If you dwell in solitude, you are not empty. You are being filled. You are not unloved. You are being loved by the one who is love itself. Living alone beats any relationship when that aloneness is filled with him. So embrace the wilderness. The wilderness is not a place of punishment, but a place of encounter. It is the place where the soul is stripped of every distraction, where the heart is laid bare, and where the voice of the eternal breaks through the noise of this world. From the beginning of Scripture to its end, the wilderness is not a curse, but a calling, God's chosen meeting ground for those he loves, those he chooses, those he prepares. Abraham left Ur, left the comfort of civilization, the familiarity of home, and ventured into the wilderness, not knowing where he was going, but knowing who was leading him. And it was in that wilderness that he heard the voice of God, received the promise, and became the father of nations. Had he remained in the noise of his land, surrounded by idols and comforts, he would have missed the whisper of the Almighty. The wilderness was not his exile, it was his exodus. Moses, too, fled into the wilderness after Egypt rejected him. At first glance it looked like failure, a fugitive hiding from justice, but in the desert something happened. He became a shepherd, not only of sheep but of his soul. There in the dry lands of Midian he was prepared, not for obscurity but for destiny. And when the time had come, the God of the bush that burned yet was not consumed spoke to him, not in the palaces of Pharaoh, but in the silence of the wilderness. Do you see? The wilderness was the womb of calling, the fire of purpose, the place where destiny is not only heard but ignited. Elijah, the prophet of fire, after calling down flames from heaven, was driven into the wilderness by fear and despair. There, under the juniper tree, he asked to die. But it was there, not in the crowd, not on the mountaintop, but in his solitude, that the angel came to feed him. There that the Lord did not thunder in earthquake or fire, but came in the still small voice. That voice could not have been heard in the noise of the world, only in the wilderness, only in the silence, only in the aloneness. Yeshua himself, our Master, our Redeemer, before he performed a single miracle, before he walked on water or opened blind eyes, was led into the wilderness. By whom, the Spirit of God, he didn't wander, he was led, and for 40 days he fasted, he prayed, he wrestled, not with man, but with the tempter. There, alone, he was tested, and there, alone, he triumphed. And it was only after that sacred solitude that he stepped into his ministry. Do you understand? Even the Son of God had to pass through the wilderness of solitude before he could walk the path of glory. So it is with us. In a world obsessed with connection, constantly buzzing, constantly talking, constantly seeking companionship, the idea of being alone is seen as something to avoid. But heaven sees it differently. The wilderness is not a place where God is absent. It is the place where He is most intimately present. It is not the place of lack. It is the place of provision. Manna falls in the wilderness. Water flows from the rock. Revelations descend like dew. In the wilderness, you discover that God is enough. When you are alone, you see yourself clearly. You see God clearly. There are no masks, no performances, no roles to play. It is just you and the Almighty. The wilderness purifies. It sanctifies. It prepares you, and those who resist it. Those who run from aloneness often miss their burning bush, their calling, their commissioning. So do not despise the wilderness. Do not flee from solitude. Embrace it. It is not a void. It is a vessel, not a curse, but a corridor to encounter. For it is in the lonely places that heaven draws near. It is there the eternal waits, not shouting, not demanding, but whispering in the stillness, calling you by name. To live alone is to step into the legacy of the prophets, to walk where the saints have walked, to hear what cannot be heard in the crowd. The wilderness is not your end, it is your beginning, and in that sacred aloneness you may just find what relationship can never give, the voice of the living God. Relationships built on the flesh will always fail you. They may begin with passion, with excitement, with promises whispered in the warmth of human emotion, but if they are rooted in the flesh, rooted in need, rooted in brokenness, rooted in fear, they will crumble like sand beneath the waves. Flesh cannot hold what only the Spirit can sustain, and this is the great deception of the age, that companionship alone is the answer to emptiness, that another human can fill the space that was made for the eternal. The world exalts relationships, romantic, social, physical, as if they are the highest purpose of human existence. We are told from our youth that without someone beside us we are lacking, that to be alone is to be less, that to be single is to be incomplete. But what if that is not truth, but illusion? What if the deepest relationships, when not born of the Spirit, become prisons rather than sanctuaries? When two people come together out of desperation, not wholeness, they don't bring life, they bring weight. They bring baggage, they bring their wounds, their needs, their empty cups, and each expects the other to pour out what neither truly possesses. And when the pouring runs dry, resentment begins. The love that once burned now smolders with unmet expectations. The joy becomes obligation, the intimacy becomes performance, because flesh cannot sustain what only the Spirit gives. It is the Spirit who binds. It is the Spirit who breathes life. Where the Spirit is absent, even love will suffocate. You cannot be someone's savior, nor can they be yours. The moment you ask a human soul to be your fulfillment, your identity, your peace, your joy, you have made them an idol, and idols always disappoint. The flesh was never designed to carry the weight of another's soul. That weight belongs only to God. But when you live alone, truly alone, not in bitterness or self-pity, but in sacred solitude, you begin to taste a different kind of strength. You are no longer leaning on another to feel validated. You are no longer trying to be chosen to feel worthy. You are no longer needing someone else to make you feel alive. Instead, your life becomes rooted in the Spirit, grounded in the eternal, anchored in the presence of the Most High. You walk with Him in the cool of the day. You eat His word as your bread. You are not waiting for someone to arrive. You are dwelling with the one who never leaves, and here is the mystery. When you are whole in solitude, every relationship becomes a gift, not a necessity. You no longer enter love to complete you, but to overflow from you. You are not a half looking for a half. You are a wellspring, and if another joins you, it is not to save or fix, but to walk together in strength. The Apostle Paul said that it is better not to marry, not because love is evil, but because aloneness allows for undivided devotion. The married are torn between pleasing their spouse and pleasing God. But the one who lives alone for the sake of the kingdom walks in a freedom that few understand, It is not a lack, it is a liberation. Think of the saints, the prophets, the messengers. So many of them walked alone. Jeremiah weeping alone for his people, John the Baptist crying out from the wilderness, Anna the prophetess, widowed young, who chose a life of prayer and fasting in the temple. These were not lonely lives, they were luminous lives. Sacred lives, lives full of God. When you build your life on the Spirit, your joy does not rise and fall with who texts you, who notices you, who loves you back. Your peace does not depend on another's affection. You are no longer at the mercy of human emotion. You are rooted, you are hidden, you are whole. So hear this truth. Relationships built on flesh bring chains. Solitude rooted in spirit brings wings. One binds you to the temporary. The other lifts you to the eternal. One fades, one remains. To live alone in the Spirit is to walk in a higher love, a deeper intimacy, a purer joy. It is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of the divine. And when he is enough, nothing else has to be. Aloneness is not loneliness, it is sanctification. The world confuses the two, but they are not the same. Loneliness is the ache of absence, the hollow echo of longing. But aloneness, when embraced in the Spirit, becomes something sacred. It becomes the fire that refines, the silence that speaks, the stillness where the soul is set apart and made holy. Aloneness is not the absence of people, it is the presence of purpose. It is the garden where the self is stripped of noise and the soul begins to bloom, not in the presence of others, but in the presence of God. The Scriptures are filled with those who were set apart, not because they were unloved, but because they were chosen. To be sanctified is to be pulled from the crowd. It is to be set aside for a purpose greater than comfort or company. You do not consecrate what is common, you consecrate what is holy. And so, when God calls a person into aloneness, he is not rejecting them, he is claiming them. He is saying, "You are mine. You are not for the noise of the world. You are not for the distractions of the moment. You are for me." This is the mystery of sanctified aloneness, that the moments which feel like abandonment are often divine appointments. The seasons that feel like isolation are actually preparation. The quiet is not your punishment, it is your purification. God removes the voices so that you might finally hear his. He removes the mirrors of others so that you might see yourself through his eyes. It is in the solitary places that your identity is revealed, not by men, but by your Maker. Consider Yeshua, who often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Why, was he not the Son of God? Did he not already walk in perfect communion? And yet, even he sought solitude, not because he was weak, but because he was wise. He knew that power flows from presence, and presence flows from intimacy, and intimacy is born in the secret place, the quiet place, the sanctified solitude where the heart is undistracted and undivided. There is a depth to the soul that can only be reached when no one else is around, a strength that is forged not in the heat of crowds, but in the chill of solitude. The psalmist wrote, "Be still, and know that I am God." Stillness is the gateway to knowing. And knowing God is the root of all true identity, all true peace, all true joy. But stillness does not visit noisy rooms. It comes in the hush of aloneness. Do not mistake your aloneness for lack. It is not emptiness, it is sanctification. You are not being punished, you are being purified. You are not being left behind, you are being lifted up. Like gold refined in fire, like a prophet hidden in the wilderness, like a vessel being prepared for holy use. Your aloneness is the work of God. He is shaping you, teaching you, stripping away everything false so that what remains is unshakable. Loneliness cries, "I am not enough without someone beside me." But sanctified aloneness declares, "I have everything I need because he is with me." This is not pride, it is truth. The lie of the world says your worth is proven by who stays, who chooses you, who loves you. But heaven says your worth was sealed before anyone ever laid eyes on you. Before you were formed in the womb, he knew you. Before anyone called you theirs, he called you his. To walk in aloneness is to walk in the footsteps of the consecrated. It is to understand that you do not need the approval of the world when you carry the presence of the King. It is to walk through valleys others fear, not because you are strong, but because he is near. It is to rise in quiet strength, to be unshaken by rejection, unmoved by silence, because you are anchored in eternity. And so, if you find yourself alone, do not run, do not seek to fill the space too quickly. Let it become holy. Let it become the altar where you meet with God, where you hear his whisper, where you are transformed. Aloneness in the hands of God becomes the soil of sanctification, and what grows there will not fade with seasons or fall with time. It will last, it will endure, and it will shine. In the silence of solitude, the voice of God becomes clearer. The world is loud. It is filled with the noise of opinions, distractions, entertainment, and endless conversations. We are constantly bombarded by voices, external and internal, telling us who we should be, what we should want, what we must do to be loved, to be successful, to be enough. And in the middle of this constant clamor, it becomes nearly impossible to hear the one voice that truly matters, the voice of the Creator. But when you step away from the noise, when you embrace the stillness of solitude, something changes. It's not that God suddenly starts speaking, it's that you begin listening. His voice was always there, like a soft wind moving across the water, like a whisper that doesn't fight to be heard. He does not compete with chaos. He waits for silence, and silence, true silence, is only found in the place of solitude. When you are alone, not lonely, not desperate, but truly alone in spirit, you begin to perceive things differently. Your mind slows, your heart quiets, the distractions that once consumed your attention fall away, and your soul begins to wake up. You notice the subtle movements of the Spirit. You begin to sense the leading, the prompting, the stirring of God deep within you. You remember what you had forgotten, that you were created not for noise, but for communion. Elijah, after his greatest spiritual victory, fled into the wilderness. There he was afraid, exhausted, ready to give up. But God called him to Mount Horeb, and there the prophet waited for the voice of the Lord. A great wind tore through the mountains, but God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake, but God was not in the quake. Then fire, but God was not in the fire. Finally, a still small voice, a whisper. That's where God was, not in the dramatic, not in the explosive, but in the quiet, in the stillness. Elijah had to be alone to hear it. The voice of God is often drowned by the presence of too many people, too many distractions, too many entanglements. Even well-meaning relationships can become noise if they are not centered in the Spirit. Constant chatter, constant validation, seeking, constant digital noise, it all creates static in the soul, and static keeps us from hearing the frequency of heaven. That's why Jesus withdrew to lonely places, not because he needed escape, but because he craved alignment. He knew that clarity only comes in quiet. Vision is born in solitude. Direction is found in silence. When you are constantly surrounded by others, you begin to lose your spiritual sensitivity. You begin to echo the voices around you rather than the voice within you. But when you are alone, you are forced to face yourself, and in that moment you are also open to face God. It is there that the clutter falls away and clarity comes. He speaks in the silence. He reveals what you've been too distracted to see. He brings correction, comfort, conviction, and calling, all in the quiet. The whisper of God can change everything. It can birth a vision, confirm a decision, convict you of sin, release forgiveness, or speak destiny into being. But you will not hear it if you never make room for it. The whisper doesn't shout over the crowd. It waits in the stillness, and to hear it, you must go where the crowd won't, into solitude. There is a price to be paid for clarity. You must turn down the volume of the world to tune in to the voice of God. And that often means choosing to walk alone, choosing to step away from certain relationships, certain conversations, certain environments. It means becoming okay with being set apart, not for isolation's sake, but for intimacy's sake. Not to withdraw from life, but to be filled with true life. In solitude, God speaks not just to your ears, but to your spirit. He realigns your heart, renews your mind, and reawakens your purpose. He speaks through His Word, through His Spirit, and sometimes through nothing more than His presence. And when you come out of that solitude, you come out different. You carry something the noise could never give: clarity, conviction, and the quiet power of having heard from God. So don't fear the silence. Don't resist the alone moments. They are not empty. They are pregnant with revelation. In the stillness of solitude, the voice of God is no longer distant. It becomes unmistakably clear. When you live alone, you learn to walk with God in a deeper, more personal way. There is something sacred about walking through life without leaning on another human soul to carry your burdens or fill your silence. It is not the path most choose, and certainly not the one the world applauds. But it is the path where divine intimacy is forged, not through noise or constant companionship, but through quiet, faithful footsteps taken beside the invisible one. When the voices fade and the crowds thin, when no one else sees your prayers or your tears, it is then that you begin to walk with God as Enoch did, not as a concept, not as a religion, but as a daily, breath-by-breath reality. There is a holy strength that forms in those who walk alone with Him, a quiet authority, a depth. The world cannot give it, and relationships often distract from it. You learn not just to believe in God, but to depend on Him. In relationships, it's easy to replace the comforter with a comforter of flesh, to replace the guide with someone else's opinions, to seek counsel in man before seeking the voice of heaven. But when you walk alone, He becomes your first and only place of refuge. He becomes your daily bread, your living water, your steady companion. You find that you are never truly alone. There's a reason that the great prophets and saints of Scripture often walked solitary roads. Joseph, before the palace, endured years of isolation. David, before the throne, learned to sing psalms in the wilderness, alone with his sheep and his God. Paul spent years in obscurity after his conversion, walking the desert paths with only the Spirit to teach him. Even John the Revelator received the vision of revelation on the barren island of Patmos, exiled and alone. Their isolation was not abandonment, it was intimacy, it was preparation. It was the space where their hearts were carved into vessels that could hold the glory of God. When you live alone, there's no one else to impress. You can't fake your walk. You can't hide behind religious performance. It's you and Him. It's the raw, unfiltered truth of your heart. The mask comes off. The performance ends. You bring your doubts, your questions, your fears, and lay them at His feet. And in that honest exchange, your faith is no longer second-hand. It's no longer borrowed from a preacher or propped up by a partner. It becomes real, it becomes yours, and there's beauty in that kind of faith. It's rooted not in approval or affirmation, but in relationship. When you wake up and speak to Him before a single person knows you're alive, you begin to see the day through His eyes. When you cry out to Him in the quiet hours of the night and feel His presence wrap around your soul, you begin to understand that love is not found in another's arms, it's found in His embrace. When you walk through pain, through disappointment, through seasons of waiting and wondering, and still choose to walk beside Him, you are being shaped into something rare. You are becoming a friend of God. You begin to hear His voice more clearly, not because He speaks louder, but because there's nothing else drowning Him out. You begin to see His fingerprints in your daily life, in the way the sun rises, in the timing of a phone call, in the peace that settles over you without explanation. You begin to trust Him in ways you never could when you had someone else to lean on. Because now, you've walked through the valley with Him. Now, you've seen His faithfulness firsthand. Now, your relationship is not theory. It's testimony. Living alone teaches you to walk by faith and not by sight. It teaches you to be content in Him. It teaches you that the most powerful, unshakable life is not the one full of followers or romance or recognition, but the one anchored in the daily, quiet companionship of the Holy One. He becomes your rhythm, your compass, your joy. So do not despise the season of walking alone. It is a gift. It is the sacred pathway of those called deeper. For those who walk alone with God now will one day walk in authority with Him later. It is not a detour from your destiny. It is the direct road into His heart.